What is up, everybody? Joined by Mr. Scott Parks. Mr. Scott, you remind me of somebody. Mr. Anyway, regardless, we're going to talk about cleaning suppressors today. And to help us do that, we have Mr. Chase Glenn from SilencerCo. And this is going to be a cool one. I think suppressors are definitely increasing in popularity. They're way more accessible. They've been normalized in a lot of ways. Scott, you were one of the first guys that I knew that was like really into suppressors, you know, had multiple suppressors and just like common use on the regular.
Yeah, I mean, early on they just made a lot of sense to me. I mean, as soon as I got into guns, and then, you know, with just my personality, I kind of just dive head first in the stuff that I have interest in, and I was like, oh, you can own these. You know, and granted, this was for a lot of people listening were probably born.
Sure.
But, you know, it's just like it makes a lot of sense. You know, it makes it easier to teach, you know, new shooters to shoot because that shock and blast that a gun has, you know, the percussion it's knocked down dramatically, so you don't develop flinches. They're not as scared when you're teaching. Obviously, for hearing protection is the biggest thing. Although you could claim a day late, dollar short, or whatever that saying
definitely
is.
For me.
You know, but yeah, I mean, what's not to like about them? You know.
Yeah. And Chase, you know, SilencerCo, you guys have been in the game for a while, and SilencerCo is one of the companies. Maybe we'll have to do a podcast with you guys, just kind of about the history of the company down the road. Maybe we got the cart before the horse here a little bit. But in the I guess what I'd call the silencer media space, you guys were doing a lot of really cool projects. You know, back in the day when I was on more on that side of the house, we collaborated on a couple cool videos several years ago. And but so that's how I really became aware of the Silencer brand, you know, through Scott, you know, being like, hey, check this out. I'm like, oh, that looks neat. And then also just the media that you guys were creating, which I think was really neat, instrumental and influential in that process that we're just kind of talking about of like normalizing suppressors. Like even like you said, Scott, oh, I can have these things.
Yeah, I would say, and I'll let Chase talk to this, just obviously briefly, since the topic is cleaning suppressors. This is
right.
We will have to do it. Definitely, I think a separate podcast on SilencerCo and their history, because some of the stuff they did has really been revolutionary for the industry, right? So, yeah, if you just want to give maybe a brief rundown on some of that stuff, you know, I mean, the Hearing Protection Act, the trust on the websites. I mean, there was so much stuff that SilencerCo was just kind of revolutionary.
Yeah, the history of the company is pretty fascinating, and you know we still same owner, same founder, which is really cool for a company. You know, last year we celebrated our 15th anniversary, which was a big moment, especially in kind of the suppressor space. And you know, one of the first products to come out, you know, to tie it into the cleaning pieces that Jonathan, the owner and founder, really wanted a 22 design that was user serviceable and commercially available. Right. So if we look at the Sparrow, which has been around forever, it's still a great product, you know, still a top selling SKU for us. The idea behind it was really easy to take apart, really easy to clean. It's got the half pipes in it. You know, there was a lot of really brilliant guys involved in that. What is actually a really simple design, right? The idea is that we can take that apart really quickly and get in there and do whatever we need to do from a service aspect or a cleaning aspect. And so, and to speak to kind of the new owners and things like that, I mean, amazingly, we haven't hit an attrition, right? Like what we still see is a lot of first time buyers, right? We see a lot of people out there that are new to this. So I think it's great timing for the podcast, you know, to kind of dispel some of the myths and give our opinions. You know, at the end of the day, it's really opinions on what you want to do and what's efficient for you. You know, my style of cleaning is going to be a lot more fast paced just because I have a lot more quantity that I have to do after I do a demo or, you know, we're out with the public or whatever the case may be versus having the time to dedicate to kind of a singular piece. Right. So
if you're watching on YouTube, then you could see, Chase, you were speaking to how, you know, fast and easy it was to disassemble that suppressor for cleaning. And Scott, I don't even think that was 15 seconds.
No, and I fumbled it a little bit. So,
So yes, it is.
yeah.
It is.
Now I will say, and Chase will probably back this up. If this is, this is a brand new one, so this hasn't been shot yet. The idea, if I remember correctly, of these sleeves is that it keeps the lead and carbon buildup from basically not welding, but mechanically almost quasi-mechanically locking the baffle stack to the tube. So you've got
That's
these stainless sleeves. These are stainless, right? If I remember correctly.
They are. Yes,
Yep.
sir.
And so you can slide the baffle stack out and clean it. Otherwise, a lot of times you've got to get a wood dowel and a hammer and stuff and kind of knock the baffles out if you've been shooting a while, anyways. But anyways, sorry to just quick over brief there or whatever, high level brief.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Chase, when it comes to cleaning a suppressor, like when can you tell that you need to clean your suppressor? Like what would be the key things to look for? Or maybe it's, performance based, or maybe it's a little bit of both. And what is building up that you need to clean off?
Sure. And I think we got to break it down into categories a little bit, right? Because, there's a group of suppressors that we're probably shooting a cast bullet through versus there's a group of suppressors that we're shooting a jacketed bullet through, right? So whenever we get into kind of our rimfire stuff, maybe some of your pistol caliber stuff, right, where you're actually running a kind of a cast bullet, that's going to be a different process or a different kind of thought pattern and attention to detail than maybe what it will be for a jacketed bullet. So, to start with the 22 suppressors, and to your point, yes, that Sparrow is a new Sparrow. That's very simple to get apart, right? My first recommendation for anybody with a 22 suppressor is, if you feel like it, and I'm gonna say that pretty directly, if you feel like it after every range, just kind of take it apart and kind of look at it and just kind of see what's going on in there, right? And that'll kind of break stuff up, Ideally, every 500, 750 rounds, we want to kind of do what's called maybe a deeper cleaning on that. For me personally, that's a fairly simple process, right? You can use a wet tumbler. Guys use ultrasonics. You want to stay away from aluminums and titaniums and ultrasonics if you have some products. And this isn't just about SilencerCo. There's a lot of great suppressor manufacturers out there, right, that make great product. But if you're getting into aluminum or titanium, you're going to want to stay away from an ultrasonic with that, right? Like those materials can disappear in those things. I keep it pretty simple. I love simple green. It doesn't do anything to a finish. It doesn't do anything. It's kind of not going to oxidize in any way. It's very, it's not corrosive in kind of any way. So typically I'll just let most of the components soak in simple green. I utilize a wet tumbler with stainless steel pins. It's pretty non-abrasive, right? If you've got O-rings, you're going to need to take those off because it'll tear up the O-ring. But I kind of treat it like the old, the Rondo rotisserie, right? Like, you set it and forget it kind of thing. And then it's like, oh yeah, I had some stuff in there. And then I don't have to worry about any kind of chemical processes that are going to create something that I have to dispose of, in kind of a certain way. Yes, we're going to have some lead in there. Yes, we're going to have carbon in there. We need to be conscious of that. But like, I'm not creating a chemical process. Like there's a term called the dip. I'm not overly familiar with it because I don't use it, but it's pretty caustic. Whenever you're done, you got to open an environment. You probably need to wear a respirator. Like, I got kids around and people around, and like, I try to avoid those kind of things. So more often than not with the 22 piece, like I it's the old KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, right? Like I'm a pretty simple guy. And so, the simpler I can keep it.
Gotcha. Would it be helpful? Like we covered some of the rimfire stuff there. Would a good way of going about this be to go from, rimfire to, centerfire pistol, long gun, gas gun? Like, are there some differences there that we should call out?
I think so. I mean, you're going to have different, you definitely have different styles of suppressors as well. Right. And so I think if we kind of went in that format, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
To kind of wrap up the 22 piece, more times than not, what you'll see is lead buildup, right? Because of that cast bullet. And you'll see these flakes or shavings of lead that happen in there, particularly in the Sparrow, in that monocore, like in that first two chambers, and so, if you let it soak in simple green for 12, 24 hours, something like that. You take you a popsicle stick, you take you a pick, your pocket knife that you don't like, whatever it is, and it just kind of falls off.
And again, and it doesn't need to be perfect, right? Like, I mean, you're gonna shoot it again, right? It's not a it's not a 7 Series BMW, right?
Yeah, it isn't a slide against anyone, but I'll see on the forums and things, and guys are like, "Look how clean I got it." Well, in reality, suppressors shoot quieter dirty than they do clean,
right?
In general. So if I want to get the quietest configuration, if sound is my primary goal, which is not the primary goal of all suppressors, but sound is my primary goal, like getting it absolutely 100% clean is more for you than it is for the suppressor.
That's good. That's good to know. And I think right before we started, Scott, you were talking about your, I guess, general philosophy when it comes to cleaning. I think firearms, suppressors, which it actually made me feel really good because I share that same philosophy. Yeah. So what's going on there for you?
So for me personally, it's kind of the bare minimum. Well, and the reason, and it's not 100% because I don't want to do it. It's a part of it. But the bigger reason is over the years I have found, because I come from precision rifle background, right? So any little changes things, right? And the precision rifle world, you want consistency, you don't want change. Mm-hmm. Now, does that mean you never pay attention to how dirty your barrel's getting or how dirty your silencer's getting? Absolutely not. You still have to pay attention to it and see, where you're at. Even with, muzzle brakes, where you get carbon buildup, you can get so much carbon buildup on muzzle brakes and silencers that the carbon actually starts impeding the bore. Or you can get a flake come off and impedes the bore. Now you get a baffle strike, because carbon's hard, right? Like a bullet hits carbon, it can rip a piece of jacket off or whatever, or cause some problem. I've seen baffle strikes from exactly that. It's the only explanation, So there's a time and place, but just like barrels, if you clean them all the time, well, now you kind of got to get them, seasoned back in to where they settle back down and get into that kind of happy spot, and with silencers, I've, the one thing I always do with a new silencer is if I plan on using it, right, so I get a couple hundred rounds on that thing to get the carbon in there, because I've found that they gain a certain amount of weight and then it kind of tapers off and then it gains weight very slowly over time, and that's one way you can monitor these things, in my opinion, is weighing them. If you want to be that anal retentive about it.
Absolutely.
Because they are absolutely going to gain weight, and they're absolutely going to shift your point of impact as they gain weight, depending on the profile. If you have a real thick barrel, it's not that big of a deal. But, if you're running an M4, like an M4 profile barrel on a gas gun, you put a couple hundred rounds on a can, and you're going to be 3/4 tenths, up a half a mil, up to probably half a mil of impact shift after those first couple hundred rounds, just because of the extra weight that carbon's put in that can.
You change the harmonics.
Absolutely.
You change that roller coaster, you change that harmonics 100%. So
yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that. And you're like, talking about it like, well, if you want to be that, but in some ways, to me, that's like a very quick, easy check, right? Throw it on the scale. You don't have to take anything apart. It's like at least one data point you can look at, like, okay, maybe I need to do something there.
Now that being said, it's a learning process, right? Because you weigh it, but you don't know until you kind of figure out where that, point of no return is. You got to figure that out, and and it's kind of like, for me with reloading, right? Like I've been doing it long enough. I don't really look at reloading, but starting loads. I just kind of feel like I know what's a good safe starting load with most cartridges, right? So I just, so there's a learning curve. Now I will say, I think this is something to keep in mind is if you are going to clean, especially on a precision rifle can, which typically, or not typically, but sometimes we'll have maybe a smaller bore than a dedicated gas gun can, You know, like dedicated gas gun cans are going to have what, like for a 5.56 gun, are going to have at least a 300 thou bore or somewhere close to that, anyways.
Not quite. Most of the time, a 30 cal bullet won't fit through them. You know what
Right,
I mean?
right.
But they are going to be overboard. Everything's going to be overboard, right? And typically it's going to be in a taper where it's going to start out to the blast baffle and it's going to be smaller.
Sure.
And then it's going to be kind of a conical effect that goes out. That way, if we do have some jacket separation or something like that, and that bullet's kind of wanting to yaw a little bit.
Sure. So the thing that I think I was getting to anyways, maybe I had a different point. But anyways, I'll get back to my original point, is if you are going to clean them, especially with the precision guns, and really this probably kind of goes for any gun or any can, is if you do decide to clean it, you really can't, while earlier we said it doesn't need to be pristine, well, at the same time, you kind of don't want to half-ass it also. You don't want to clean it to the point to where you just knock a bunch of carbon loose, and that carbon's still kind of just hanging on in there, and now all of a sudden you have even more carbon coming into the bore.
Yeah, I don't want a baby rattle.
Exactly.
Right? And then you'll hear it, right? Like you'll hear it. They're kind of shaking around. I don't want to have any kind of impurity or, flakes of carbon or whatever just kind of floating around in there, because that will affect the trajectory, right? Which
and possibly cause baffle strikes.
Or miss something you're shooting at.
Yeah.
Right. You miss that animal you're shooting
Absolutely.
at. Like whatever's the most important to you at the time. Right.
Or God forbid a hostage situation with some of our LE mill guys,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yes, very critical. What about, did we cover the rimfire stuff pretty good?
I mean, Scott, I feel like we did.
I think so.
They're kind of.
Yeah, I was maybe gonna dip back on the the dip, and so a little history, like that dip's been around honestly since I've been into silencers. And I remember reading it before. I'm like, I don't want to. I can't remember what's in there. It's like peroxide. Is it ammonia? Like peroxide, ammonia, and
I think vinegar
and vinegar maybe. I can't remember. Maybe I don't know. I don't remember. I haven't even seen it in like 15 years.
That's how little I care about it.
I'm like, I remember when it came. I'm like, I'll just use like a brush and a screwdriver and a knife or something. Like, I don't know that I need to do all this,
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's, one of my questions, because I was looking at, and maybe the answer is it depends, but kind of what I was seeing as some of the most popular ways, like there's multiple ways to skin this cat, but like, and maybe we're jumping towards the end of my question list here, but like, and I think maybe you even answered it, Chase, earlier, like what method makes the most sense for the average consumer, and like what's the most practical, and I think that's what a lot of folks are going to be I think I was watching one of your guys' videos, and there was like like a soda blasting machine, and showing like some other wet tumbler, dry tumbler, things like that, and a lot of folks, they may not have, access to something like that, or Correct. It's an extra additional purchase. A lot of folks do have those items. But hearing you talk about the simple green, it's like, well, shoot, I already have that at my house. I
was just going to say, in general, kind of across the board, like simple green and drain it out and shoot it. You know what I mean? Like if I was gonna boil this down in the cauldron, right? Simple green, let it soak, kind of break stuff up, drain it out really good so I don't have some of that stuff kind of floating around. You can rinse it out with dish soap. You're not going to hurt it. And then shoot it and get it hot, right, is going to be not your most effective way, right? Like, obviously, we can get in there with a soda blaster, not personally, but like what we have to do at the factory whenever we get warranty situations or whatever the case may be, but it's going to be, for most of the people listening, this is completely sufficient for what you're going to be doing, right?
Hey, real quick, could you give a 10-second rundown of what a soda blaster is? Just
compressed air blowing. So I mean, it's
a media blaster.
It's a media blaster, same as your walnut. Like all the other things you use. Take paint off metal. Things like that. I just try to avoid, and I'm not the guy that's like, man, the exterior of my can's got to look perfect. In fact, I kind of have to send my kid into SilencerCo on a regular basis to kind of get it looking show ready, because I'm hard on stuff, right? Like I get out there and I use it, and use it effectively. And so, but I don't want to necessarily do something that's going to, ruin the finish of it, or cause it in some sort of caustic kind of way. You know what I mean? That's really what I'm trying to avoid. So in a standpoint,
I would say if I had to guess, I would say probably one of the quickest ways to clean cans, and well, let me back up one quick. So like the soda blasting is, I would assume, is designated for cans that you can take apart, right? You don't want to be blasting any media up into a sealed can. You're just going to make your life much harder. Just to put that through. But as far as like your question, Mark, I would think, a soak with Simple Green in a tumbler. Now, and what I would recommend, if you have time, in a tumbler, is I would let it soak for as long as you can, and then tumble it. Because tumbling it right off the bat, it's the main thing you're doing right then is soaking, right? The tumbling's not doing a whole lot at that point. The soak really needs to kind of soften things up before the tumbling can actually start working. And I've found that, and the longer you tumble, the more wear you're going to get on the finish of the can, and just different aspects, different edges. You can, roll, if there's some sharp edges, if you're doing like stainless steel media, you could, roll over some edges or something like that on the baffles. If you tumble too long, I don't think it would affect anything, but
with most manufacturers, the 17.4, whatever they're using in there has been heat treated.
Sure.
So it's actually harder.
Exactly.
Than your pins, right? Your stainless steel pins.
Perfect. So it shouldn't be a problem.
Most of the time, right? So you're going to avoid putting aluminum and titanium and some of those things in there that can be softer, right? But across most manufacturers, I would say that to be true. I don't want to speak for everybody, but we're going through a hardening process on that, and actually multiple hardening processes in some cases. And so the pins are going to be a little bit softer, which is why I really hesitate to kind of throw particularly our stuff in with pins. It's like, it'll change the finish a little bit. It'll change the nitride on it a little bit. It definitely will do that. So you have to be cautious to that.
Right.
So,
well, and the other thing is too, is, with the sealed cans, stainless, probably not a great idea. You're never going to get all the pins out of there. I don't think,
When I talk about using the tumbler, I'm talking more about the accessories.
Yes.
Right. Like I'm talking more about your muzzle devices and your pistons and spring and, and then 22 cans. Right, because I can take the pistols out. A majority of your manufacturers, and we'll get into kind of Centerfire and pistol and all that, a majority are doing a welded suppressor, right? And that's a, there's user serviceable ones and then ones that are welded together, and there's different reasons for that, right? Most of the time, whenever I'm talking about that process of kind of a wet tumbler, I'm talking about, I've got a quantity of accessories that I do need to clean, right? And then I do need to keep the carbon off of, because it's going to affect the concentricity of it. It's going to affect the lockup of it. It's going to affect those things.
Sure,
right?
Sure. So for welded cans, you're better off either just soaking, or if it's not aluminum or titanium, maybe a sonic cleaner.
That's right.
With Dawn and water or Simple Green and water.
Yeah,
something like that
as well. And I love, I'll go back to kind of your weight method, right? Most people, probably have some sort of kitchen scale or something like that, and you just kind of throw it on there. And if I know that this suppressor is supposed to be 8.3 ounces and it's 10 ounces, I might need to figure out why. And I don't mean to jump ahead whenever I say this, but like a lot of great manufacturers have a great warranty and great customer service. So that's the time to most have a lifetime warranty. And the reason is because that, the guys that are listening, you guys have spent $200 on top of the cost of the suppressor, and you're attached to this for the rest of your life, or your trust is attached to it for the rest of your life. Right. So like we recognize that and we understand that. And so, we pride ourselves on our customer service and our warranty, similar to Vortex, right? Where it's like, hey, we're going to take care of the customer. And so if you put it on there and that 8.3 ounce suppressor now weighs 20 ounces, we got a problem. We're going to ask you to send it back in. We're going to take care of you. It may be welding a whole new stack on the end of that suppressor or whatever the case may be, and getting it back to the weight that it needs to be. but that's part of that commitment that we make to the customer. And a lot of manufacturers make to the customer to like, hey, we're going to take care of you. So we don't have to overthink it, right? Like, we don't, I love not having to be the expert in the room, right? And I'm not today. You know what I'm saying? And so, for the guys listening, like, you don't have to be the expert. Like, you got 1-800 numbers, give us a call. Happy to walk you through it. Happy.
Absolutely. And I would imagine much like us, if you have any concerns at all, send it to us. We'll check it out and let you know what I think, let you know what we think.
Yeah. And then, we fix everything, and if it doesn't need to be fixed, we'll let you know. But like that's a, no cost for the repair, to the customer. And we try to get them done really quickly. Typically it's longer to ship to us and ship back than it does to, like that stuff's important to us. Right.
Yeah. I may or may not know somebody that left a magneto speed alignment rod in their Omega 300 a few years back and shot it.
Any, you don't want to name names?
He's just a big, dumb, bald guy.
You guys, you're talking about manufacturers though, and we've talked about different styles of suppressors here a little bit, like what you might do with a 22 can, you might not do, or likely wouldn't do with a welded can. When you buy that suppressor, is it going to come with some, cleaning suggestions or guidelines from you guys saying like, hey, if you want to clean this thing, we suggest, X, Y, Z?
Yeah, we've got a little bit of stuff in our manual, right? And I think our group that, marketing group and media group, we spend a lot of time on that. There's a lot of, on our YouTube and thing, there's a lot of how-tos as well. And then, we really put it on the responsibility of the team that's out, kind of facing the consumer to educate them as well. So, if you look at SilencerCo as a whole and, we're really an education team, is what we do. We're really out there trying to educate and reach as many people as we can. We know we're not reaching 100% of y'all. Right. But like but we're available, we're available and easy to reach.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to back up on real quick, I just thought of, Mark, is so while we did mention, you can, weigh the silencers, this type of thing, but just to give you an idea of specifically on Centerfire cans, like myself personally, I like I said, I covered this in the beginning. I don't clean if I don't have to. And I mean, I can tell you with say 6 Creedmoor, 6.5 Creedmoor, those type cartridges, I mean, and some people may disagree with this and may say that I'm going to run into issues. But man, I bet somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 rounds before I clean, because just I feel the Centerfire cans or Centerfire cartridges are they're blasting those baffles so hard every time you shoot that they're not cleaning themselves, but to an extent they kind of are.
Like a self-cleaning oven.
Yeah, I don't know if not the way mine works, but but yeah, it's like I said, they're not cleaning themselves, but they are kind of in a way. Like, I'd hate to say self-maintaining because that's not the right word. Maybe Chase, maybe you can expound on that.
Particularly what you're talking about in the precision aspect, you're talking 10-round strings, right? Like you go shoot off a barricade's 10 rounds now, 5 positions, right? And so it's so immediately that can's getting 200 and 250 degrees on the first shot. And then it's gonna gain heat as it goes along, which is why people use suppressor covers and the Mirage can affect and from a precision aspect and make that reticle start to dance around and do some of the stuff we don't want to do in the precision side of things, right? And so absolutely true, right? We are kind of blowing that out. You mentioned earlier that kind of specific cans for specific calibers. We'll use, so I'm I don't know, 5,000-6,000 rounds into 6 Creedmoor this year, right? Same as you. Like, I'm a big fan. I cut that can apart. I used the same can and cut it apart this last month. And didn't have any significant weight, didn't have any significant carbon. Right. And so it's I'm using good ammo, using a good bullet. So I would say on that, the heat is helping to blow that out, right? It has a 30 cal bore on the suppressor, so I'm shooting a 6mm bullet, so I've got a little bit more space to kind of blow that fouling out. A lot of my precision guys, they actually like running kind of a 30 cal can with a 30 cal end cap versus kind of, if it's modular and I can change the size of the end cap, they'll keep it open because it is blowing that fouling out. Um, you know, I use mine direct thread. You can use them kind of however you want. I'll see some buildup of carbon on the crown, right? And to kind of go back to a story, like I heard a story the other day that I thought was pretty hilarious. A PRS guy, right? Not going to say his name, but he's shot really well and won a bunch of stuff. He was at it in the middle of a match and bullets just start flying all over the place. He's using a brake, right? And his bore diameter of his brake was smaller than his 6 millimeter bullet, right? So when we talk about carbon and how hard it can get or what it can do to restrict, you wouldn't think that on a brake that's blowing the gas, in a really effective way to be able to do that. And, he's in the middle of a match and he's got stuff just going crazy, right? And so, yes, that can happen, right? Yeah, yes, we can get those, buildups, and it is very hard. It's a diamond-like carbon, right? It's compared to that from kind of a hardness standpoint. But cutting that can apart the other day, it was a pretty good eye opener, and I've been doing that pretty regularly on some of my hard use stuff to say, okay, well, what's really going on in here?
And the reason I bring that up is because what I don't want is for guys, I mean, you can clean your can all you want. Obviously it's yours. You can do it all you want. But if you're like me and you don't want to, like, this podcast isn't to say, hey, you need to be cleaning your can every 600 rounds on your Centerfire rifle, because I don't think that's true. Mm-hmm. It sounds like Chase experience is the same, right? Yep. Here we are, we're, run 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 rounds without cleaning.
Well, I'm glad you qualified that a little bit too, because a person might be like, well, I need to weigh my can. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's 0.1 out of spec. Well, you're probably good.
That probably happened in the first 15 rounds. Quite honestly.
That might be water retention.
Right.
I don't know. Like I get on the scale in the morning and I'm like, well, there's 3 pounds.
Yeah.
We've talked about maybe some of the more extreme negative results from not properly cleaning when it's needed. What are some other things that can happen? Can it potentially just, compromise the integrity of the suppressor itself? I really don't know.
I think, whenever we get into reputable manufacturers, right? Like, knock your guy down the road, kind of build him on his lathe, kind of thing. But like, we all have issues, right? Like, I don't want to sit here and act like, there aren't mistakes made, or, manufacturers don't make mistakes. Like stuff happens, right? We all have warranty situations, whatever the case may be. Like if you build enough products and you've been in this long enough, things are going to happen. But the intention and the attention to detail and the QC process, and is hopefully going to get in front of a lot of that. So we're not really affecting from a kind of a manufacturer standpoint, right? Like whenever we're talking about carbon buildup and things like that, most of the time, the most common thing that I see is more on kind of the mounting solutions, right? And so and I'll pick on our own mounting solution. If you look at the ASR, right, which has a taper in it, and we've got 3 ports, we've got flash hiders, we've got single ports, we've got a lot of different options. Well, that taper, if I have a bunch of oxidation, or copper or carbon on that taper is what lines the rest of that up, right? And I think the thing that people forget, and I don't mean to dissuade anybody from buying a suppressor, but like there's a certain responsibility and vigilance that comes along with owning a suppressor and putting a suppressor on the end of a gun. Because if I didn't have a hole in the end of that, I just created a pretty big explosion, right? So like, like guys are like, well, I want the lightest, leanest, fastest, put it on quick, yada, yada, yada. I'm literally putting something on the end of the barrel, right? And so I think that, attention to detail on the mounts and the cleanliness of the mounts and pistons for pistol suppressors, and are the parts moving correctly in there, the ones that are wearable parts that are made to move, that's probably the most important piece of this conversation. Whenever we get into welded cans, we get into Centerfire cans, we get into things like that, right? Like that's where it really starts to matter. Because if that thing's off just a little bit, well, the bore is now not concentric, right? If you were to put a rod down it, like it's not gonna line up. And so, guys will pay a lot of attention whenever they're first putting it on, and they'll put bore rods down it and things like that. But like, it really matters more down the road. You know
Sure.
what I mean? Like if it's good to go, now really matters more down the road, like on that mounting surface of how we're attaching it.
When it comes to those attachment points and the various methods that a person can, that they're all probably going to have, maybe their pros and cons. Is there one just purely for like, maintenance and cleaning that's going to be less prone to potentially collecting, carbon and things of that nature?
Direct thread is always going to be you got the least amount of parts. You know what I mean? It's also going to be your loudest configuration. So if decibels matter to you, okay, it's also going to be lighter. You know what I mean? Because I'm not adding in parts. So like, we have to balance what we want out of it. I have multiple rifles I want to put a can on. Great. Get muzzle devices, swap from gun to gun to gun. I go from half 28, 5/8 24 over to the metric stuff. Like that's why those exist, and why Jonathan was really the one to kind of come up with what we call modularity, which is not necessarily in length. It's being able to change end caps and change mounting styles. Direct thread, while it's the loudest configuration, it's the least amount of parts, right? Like I'm now blowing pretty much 100% of that carbon into that expansion chamber, that first chamber. And that's where it's, that's its first kind of settling point, right? Which is easy to see, easy to get into. Whenever I start adding on muzzle devices or, pistons in the case of, pistol suppressors that aren't direct threaded, that's where I'm adding in multiple locations for that carbon to get up there and kind of find its way, right? And I can talk a little bit about those, because I think a common mistake people make is that they overhear what I say, and they clean them, right? And they get them, and they'll put CLP on them, or they'll put whatever on them, and they'll pull all the oil out of them, but then they put them back on the gun. And I'm a simple guy. I love cast iron, right? My kids and my wife aren't allowed to touch my cast iron. Right? They're going to put it in soapy water.
Yeah.
And then they're going to take my thing out. Right. So like, there's almost kind of a reseasoning process, because all I've done is I've taken all the oil and, I've opened up those pores on that steel. Most of the time it's steel. You know what I mean? I've opened up those pores, and now, their first trip out to the range, they'll come back and they'll be like, my suppressor's carbon locked onto my thing. That's the common term, right? Like, it's carbon locked on. And it's like, so my simple solution to that is, after I get done cleaning, I put it on a sheet tray. And I like to do it whenever like my wife's out shopping. I'll run into the house and put it in the oven real quick at like 220, 230 degrees, and get all of the water out of it. And then I take it back outside and I just spray it down with oil.
Okay.
Right? Like whatever your oil is. And to me, that's that cast iron effect, where I've opened up those pores because of the heat. I now kind of throw back in, a little bit of oil and kind of smooth out those surfaces a little bit, and do that. So, and I don't mean to obsess about kind of mounting surfaces, but I do think it is kind of one of the more important features on this, of like, it's the overlooked piece. It's the part made to wear. It's the part that's, not going to have it can't have a lifetime lifespan. Right.
It's a wear part.
It's a wear part. It's a wear part. We still take care of the customer on a lot of them, but like, it's still a wear part. So.
Now, when you, just to clarify, like, you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds when it comes for the well, when I say thousand, I mean, 10, 15, 20,000, the life of a gun anyways.
Absolutely.
For the most part.
Absolutely.
Right. Because the gun has wear parts too, right? It's moving more than a can.
It does. We're not talking an annual basis by any means.
Right.
Yeah.
Different suppressors use kind of different baffle systems. What are there any that are more or less prone to fouling, or is that more just dependent on the platform that, like we were talking about, rimfire versus pistol, long gun, gas gun?
I'm gonna go kind of the platform route, right? Like there are different baffle designs, right? And then, we can talk about kind of the hard use cans and the low back pressure cans, and, where we start to get some directional changes on gas, and, the idea is that we're getting less gas on the shooter, right? And more is moving forward. But to kind of keep it to the standard baffle that everybody thinks whenever they Google, what's the inside of a suppressor looks like. There's not particularly one that, is going to collect more than the other. It really becomes host specific at that point, right? If I'm shooting a bunch of 300 blackout subsonic, that has the yellow filler in it, then I might need to clean that sooner, right? Just because it's got kind of more impurities in it than if I'm shooting, some clean kind of match grade kind of ammo, right? And barrel length matters, right? Have I burned off all the powder? Like there's a lot of variables, the same variables that we get asked, pretty consistently of like, well, what's this suppressor going to sound like? That's a pretty tough question to answer. You know what I mean? Like, are you in a basement in Utah? Or are you outside? What's the gun? What's the ammo? What'd you eat for breakfast? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of different variables in that. And so it's kind of a challenging question. Well, the same could be said for like what's going to dirty up a suppressor. There's a lot of different hosts and a lot of different factors that go into that. So going back to what, was said before, like put it on the scale. That's your tried and true kind of safe way. Visually inspect it. You know what I mean? Look at your mounts, see, oh man, I've got a lot of carbon on this mount, on this mounting surface. I probably need to pay attention to detail on that. Right. Like, and to go back to what, I was talking about just recently was, I'm putting something on the end of a gun. I need to have a little bit of attention to detail. I probably want to inspect it the same way that I would my chamber on my precision guns. Right. I was in the middle of shooting a string the other day, got a piece of brass in my chamber, couldn't finish the stage. You know what I mean? Like it happens. Couldn't close the bolt.
Yeah. The going back to the carbon on the muzzle brakes or on the on the crown, I can tell you, we've had multiple times where we've been working with customers who thought they had an issue, with their scope holding zero or whatnot, and we're beating our heads against the wall, and we finally, here we'll just like, hey, well, do you mind just sending your whole gun here so we can figure it out, And I can tell you throughout my years here, there's been multiple times where, muzzle brakes have carbon's been, close enough to where it's causing some issues, where, because you can test that real quick. I mean, you take the muzzle brake off, and all of a sudden the gun shoots. It's like, well, okay, well, we found the variable here.
We've pinpointed the problem.
I think it's important to point out like how we as companies work together, right? Like we've sent a lot of suppressors over to Vortex, and you guys have sent a lot of glass away over the years. And the idea is that we can be, advocates for each other. We can be good partners in that. We can be resources in that to kind of understand what's going on, because I want you guys to know as a company, like, hey, here's how this is going to perform in an ideal environment, right? Because I don't want your customer to have a bad experience because, the carbon on our mount, you know what I mean? Like that's not fair to you. And so, being the solution kind of across the board for all of us, I think is really
absolutely. So, I think that's the spirit of this podcast.
For sure. We were talking about something very similar on a different podcast the other day, but we are so fortunate, like even just internally here at Vortex, like I can lean on Scott for information or, anybody. We've all had so many experiences, and the more we talk to each other, the more you can find out and you can learn from this guy or even just corroborate things. Man, I was doing this and I saw that, and you're like, I saw the same thing, and so it's like, when you think you're like, am I crazy? And then all of a sudden you're like, no, wait, maybe there's a trend here. So I think, and like, we get to talk to guys like you and corroborate the things, just, learn from your experiences. So, I mean, it really is cool when you do have good relationships with, the people that you work with or other folks in the industry, and you can help each other a lot for sure.
Yeah. And I can tell you, like these days too, like there's so many companies, that are just really stacked up with a lot of just a wide range of talent, whether it's, crazy extreme Western hunters. And I call them crazy just because of the stuff that they do, going hunting by themselves in the middle of nowhere for weeks on end.
There's some guys doing some wild stuff for sure.
PRS shooters, USPS. I mean, I mean, we have working here. We have USPSA Grandmasters. We've got PRS winners. We've got some top 3-gun shooters. F class champion. And that's it's just to name a few. And that's just like the top level. You know. And I can tell you, like 15 years ago, you'd go to talk to a gun company or a silencer company, and they shoot and plink and stuff, but it wasn't the same depth. And and a lot of that is because of just how much the industry's grown and stuff like what SilencerCo has done for silencers, has brought so many more people into the shooting sports. I mean, I think, what was it, basically March of 2020 through, I want to say, almost all of 23, every month was over 4 million NICS background checks, which is double of the previous record of any year before that. And we're doing it every month,
Right. Right.
So in the amount of, the amount of new shooters and the amount of, people just within the industry that are really shooting now, like you go over to Hornady and see, there's so many people that shoot that place, and come to Vortex or SilencerCo, I mean, hell, that's how I met Jonathan, James Christensen, I'm sure you remember, and Harris and Henry when he was still there, that's how I met those guys shooting PRS matches in 2010, I think,
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
before some things existed, right? It's
it wasn't PRS matches back then. It was just matches, but PRS didn't exist.
We'll do another podcast. I'm happy to talk about the history and maybe get Jonathan on it as well. But they, I totally agree, right? I think a lot of companies have matured into people that have a healthy obsession with not only the product.
That's being nice calling that healthy, but we'll go with it.
And I had to throw that in there.
It's what I tell myself and other people. Yeah,
this is healthy. Healthy about not only their own product, but the shooting sports in general, right?
Yeah.
And a passion of ours and a passion of a lot of other companies is, that new shooter piece. Right. We were in Texas this last weekend and had 3 or 4 people at a demo, males and females, that it was not only their first time shooting a suppressor, it was their first time shooting a gun. Right. And we really kind of revel in those experiences where it's hey, this is not the big bad thing. This is not the movie thing, here's an experience that we can have that can be really joyful. And, it's easy for me to get my family into it and my kids into it, right? But to take it over to there, I think that's passionate. So not only can we be really passionate about our product, but about the industry as a whole and everything that we do, and then hopefully about y'all that are listening, right? Like we care. We want to see you guys involved in this, and we want you to have a really good experience with it, right?
For sure. Well, and Scott, you're talking about seeing kind of that growth of people who are passionate about, these types of related activities, that whether it's, firearms, scopes, suppressors, that sharing of knowledge component that we're talking about. You named 3 companies. Okay. Well, SilencerCo, creating really great media, educational media. People have access to it. I don't have to know somebody at SilencerCo personally. I don't have to know you personally. We have the podcast and other videos that we produce here. Hornady, they have their podcast, and so you have so many companies in the space creating great content, and then you have an amazing just wealth of independent media producers as well, creating all this amazing educational, informative content. You got to weed through some of it, right? You got to separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit. But I mean, and it's no secret, we're all aware of the internet these days, but man, that really has changed that access component to the types of information that we're talking about today.
Yeah. And, and hopefully it's come through in our podcast and when we talk about this stuff, but, and I hesitate to bring this up, and I'm just going to try to do it in a nicest way I can. Contrary to what you may read or see sometimes on the negative side of the internet. It's like, and going back to what I was saying, I hope this comes through on some of these podcasts when we're talking to other companies and whatnot. But like, these products they're our babies, man. Like, we put our life in. Like, now they may not be exactly what everybody wants. We try to make everybody happy. We do our absolute best. And we have a bunch of passionate people that love what they're doing. And we listen to customers as much as we can, as on with what's reasonable. Obviously, we can't make a $20,000 optic and sell it for $200, right? Like,
right.
That's why when I say like reasonable, but like, we love what we do, and put years of research and development into every product, and I mean, I know, some of the time you guys put into silencers just from talking to Jonathan over the years and other guys, it's like, it's not like just drew something up in SolidWorks and welded it together and said, well, hope it works,
I mean, as hard as you think you can be on us, you can't be harder than we are ourselves.
100%.
Right? You know what I mean? Like in reality, it's the processes, the new product processes, all that kind of stuff, the production processes. Like we are looking, and we don't always catch all of them, right? You know what I mean? We got brilliant people here, and we've got brilliant engineers that we lock in the office and roll a Red Bull in there every once in a while. Like they're brilliant and smart. It doesn't mean that we're actually going to catch everything, but it's our intention to, right? Like there are other processes to be able to do that. And so you're absolutely right. They are our babies, right? Our 30 cal can that we came out with last August. Like I have 3 or 4 different touch points on that, being part of that product process that are really important to me, and so it's it's a sense of pride and a sense of ownership on that particular product for me to be able to say, hey, these are the things.
Right.
Yeah, you definitely, when you're passionate about your work, you don't check it at the door. When you leave the building, I'm not on the product development side of things here at Vortex, but I've come up with a couple ideas over the years that have been implemented, Scott. But yeah, a lot of them happen. Like you're laying in bed at you can't sleep and you're like, I thought about this, or right. Whatever. Like in the shower in the morning, you're like, I should. It's just you're constant because you eat, sleep, and breathe it because you love it.
Absolutely. 100%. Sorry to get us off topic.
I know. It's hard. We're passionate. Yeah. Going to my, because I want to check some of these things off. Going back to like maybe some of the differences in cleaning for like a pistol suppressor, your long gun, gas gun, or even just a few considerations a person might want to be thinking about depending on the host that they're putting that suppressor on.
So let's start with pistol, and that's kind of a I guess hybrid to speak, because you're going to have some guys that want to shoot cast bullets, right? Or shoot some kind of big bore stuff that you may shoot through a pistol suppressor that may be kind of a cast bullet. So in the case of a cast bullet, it'd be really ideal to have something that you can get in, and pick that out. So user serviceable. We had a product called the Octane that was really kind of designed around that to be able to get in and clean. But then we've got welded cans too, right? The Omega and Osprey line and the new Spectre line, they're all welded cans. So not ideal to shoot cast through those, right? Cast bullets through those. What we see, and kind of speaking to the consumer, is more consumers are shooting a jacketed bullet. They're shooting some sort of FMJ or some plating or something like that. And so the most important piece to me on the pistol is going to be, I actually have one sitting right here. So you've got some sort of spring, right? Because they've got a Nielsen device, booster, whatever you want to call, and that allows that piston to move back and forth and compress that spring on a non-fixed barrel, right? So most of your pistols have a non-fixed barrel. So the idea is that a piston's going to go inside of here, and then you've got this little kind of retaining cap that kind of holds everything together, right? Get it up here where you can see it. You got a lot of movement. You've got a lot of opportunity for carbon, right? Keeping those parts clean and lubricated is going to be important. You've got an O-ring in there. So, from a lubrication standpoint, a lot of times with pistols, you'll see it as well because of the short barrel. A lot of that lubrication from the gun is ending up in the suppressor, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but what it does is it creates a surface area for stuff to stick, right? As it loses its viscosity and right, just kind of gums up, so to speak. So I'll see guys that, they're like, well, my pistol can won't, I'm getting failure to feed and failure to extract with the suppressor. It was running great, and now it's not. Okay, well, first rule, do we have something going on with the baffles, right? Did we have a jacket separate, or we weren't concentric, and like, do we have a baffle strike, right? If that's not the case, 9 times out of 10, it boils down to that piston, that spring, and it's just not moving correctly, right? So like that inertia that's created by that spring isn't there anymore. So pistol cans, you'll see, we'll see it a lot with like demo cans that we'll send out to dealers, right? And they've got them on their wall where they just never touch them, and they've got them on the end of, some sort of PCC, or, it's their full auto rental, right? And they haven't touched them in 150,000 rounds. True story, right? Like this is more common than not, right? And they're like, well, we really need to kind of look at this and get it serviced. Okay, can you throw it on the scale for me and let me know it weighs 3 times what it was? Because they probably had some jack root separation over time. They've got a little bit of lead buildup because of that, things like that, some carbon in there. For the consumer, if you get up to like 2 times the weight of your can, we're probably going to have to replace that can, because it's probably got something in there that we can't get out effectively, right? Like it's probably more of a lead situation than it is a carbon situation for one reason or another. So fortunately with us, we use those sleeves, right, on the can. So from a serial standpoint, we don't have to do a new tack stamp. We just pull that sleeve off and put a new sleeve on from a warranty situation. But like, we don't want to get 2 times the weight ever. There's no reason. There's no good reason for that. Your Centerfire cans, we kind of covered them a little bit with kind of the direct thread piece and kind of the precision piece. It's going to be the same aspect. More often than not, Centerfire cans are getting a lot less rounds than what, Scott and I are putting through them, right? Guy, I don't blame you. Everything's, gotten more expensive. You get a couple bucks of ammo right before hunting season, you kind of shoot it and go through it. And so you're probably never going to see a situation where that truly, is affecting the can, right? Maybe a mounting situation, but more often than not, maybe your abatement hunters, your coyote and, your prairie dogs and things like that, where they're putting a lot of rounds. But once again, just kind of falling back on the attention to detail on that, take it off every once in a while, throw it on the scale, look at your mounting system, whatever you use. There's a lot of great ones out there, and kind of keep those clean and keep them lubed up. One product that's really easy to get, and there's there's suppressor cleaners out there. There's suppressor lubrication out there. There's a lot of great ones. My kind of fail safe is I go to auto parts store and I buy gray high temp grease, and I don't actually grease the threads. This is important. I don't grease the threads of the mounting system. I just put a little grease on the taper, right? Just a thin coating. And it's that gray stuff that like won't come off. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be on your hand for the next couple of days kind of stuff. But that creates just a little bit of barrier for that carbon at a sticking point to not let it get up into kind of the threads that screw it or unscrew it or clamp it on or however you're doing it, right? If we get into kind of the hard use stuff, your AR stuff, gas gun kind of stuff, I think anybody that doesn't own a suppressor and has a gas gun realizes how dirty they get, right? We've got stuff down in the lower. We've got, especially if we're looking at DI guns, right? They're just dirty. It's just kind of part of the process, and nothing wrong with them. And I love them, and I got tons of them, and I love the short ones, and all that kind of stuff. But the shorter they get, the dirtier they're going to get. The quicker they're going to get. And so if we get into kind of the class of low back pressure cans, right, that the idea is that we're going to actually relieve some of that gas out of the the suppressor, what we're doing is we're taking that fouling, we're taking that unburnt gases, you know, in your 7.5-inch AR that's not burning anywhere near the powder that it needs to. And that's ending up in the suppressor, right? So that tends to be fairly new technology. There's not a lot of data on it. My personal experience, I had one recently that had 18,000 rounds that exclusively lived on belt fed and full auto 5.56. I cut it in half on our EDM, which doesn't vibrate or anything. Like, I'm not knocking carbon out of it. Didn't have any buildup in it, right? And so, but we just got to keep in mind, the more surface area we have in something, the more opportunity we have for carbon, right? So the idea is those are creating surface areas for those gases to slow them down even more, but then venom, you know, let them release out at the end, you know, to get that gas off of the shooter is really the ideal situation. So in the case of those, I'm still falling back to my kind of old safeguard, you know, Simple Green's cheap. You can get it at the hardware store, run down there, get it, let it soak. It's really easy to shoot fast and get it hot on an AR, you know, so just make sure it's drained out. I'm not a big fan of liquids in suppressors, right? So make sure it's drained out, rinsed out, all that kind of stuff, and have a good time, you know, and go with, you know, go with the reputable manufacturers. They're going to take care of you if something doesn't work, you know, or if it's not performing the way it is, it should be. You know, that's like, there's no reason for it not to be. So let's figure out why. You know, let's come up with a solution and get you into, you know, a really happy, pleasant, you know, rainbows and sunshine experience.
I like that.
Yeah.
Who doesn't like that? Chase, just to clarify though, for a person who is wanting to check and see if their suppressor, you know, might need some cleaning, cutting it in half is not the recommended method to do that.
No, in fact, they're probably going to go through a lot of blades to be able to get that done. My process of doing it is really simple, you know what I mean? But like, they can put it on their bandsaw, and you take products like steel, you know, alloys like Inconel and Stellite and some of these other things, like that would actually, you know, don't do this, but that would be interesting to see, you know what I mean? It's, maybe we need to kind of do our own video on that, you know, like, here's how long it really takes, you know, it's, because you're going to dull some stuff really quick.
Interesting. Well, and then you mentioned this before, and I just kind of want to go into it because suppressors are coming in. They're made of all sorts of different things. So, like, what are the major considerations, you know, between, like, you know, your titanium suppressor versus, you know, I guess the other materials that are out there too? Just to clarify, because, you know, a person might have one versus the other.
Sure. Specific around cleaning?
Specific around cleaning, yeah.
Okay.
I personally am going to kind of treat them all the same, right?
Okay.
Based on kind of the products that I use. Titanium tends to be more porous, right? In general, we don't want to get titanium too hot, because titanium, whenever it gets too hot, it starts the oxidation process a lot sooner than stainless steels or alloys or some of the other stuff we use. So we want to be cognizant of that. Now, us guys on our bolt guns, we're never going to get titanium hot enough. You know, like, we're going to start CPOI shifts and, you know, mirage and just weird kind of stuff go on with the bullet that we're not going to like. You know, when my bullet doesn't go where I want it to go, I feel funny, right? So, like, I stop and I'm like, okay, well, let's figure out what's going on. You know, you put titanium on an AR, and, you know, you get a couple mags in, you're getting hot enough to start that oxidation process. Well, because titanium is more porous, it tends to stick more, right? And so you may have different responses to carbon with titanium than you do with a stainless steel that's a tighter grain, right? And because we can heat treat stainless steel and some of these other products, we can actually change the molecular structure and make it even tighter, right? That's what we're doing in that process. And so, but for a general rule, just to keep it simple, stupid, I treat them all the same. Just let them soak. You know, if I do, I don't clean that often, just to be really transparent about it. I'll throw them on the scale once a year, you know, but I'm in a different situation where, like, literally thousands and thousands of rounds are going through these a year.
Yeah.
You know, for your, you know, separate from 22 cans, we gotta be mindful of that 500 to 750 rounds. Like, for most guys, like, have a great experience. You know what I mean? Like, just enjoy the product. You know, we don't need to obsess about this thing being spick and span.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be really my final takeaway for those two things, because and it's music to my ears too, because like I enjoy shooting. Scott, you may know I predominantly like just hunting, but my volume of fire is going to be such that, I mean,
you are just hunting. So.
Yeah, I might never have to worry about it. I'll sometimes,
right. I'll tell you honestly what I do, because I really enjoy shooting, and I actually only shoot a few guns. I have a whole lot more that I have acquired over the years. As many of you listening probably have the same problem. But I also don't like cleaning. And so what I do, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but if you're like me and you don't clean all that often, and you have a bunch of guns that sometimes get shot when you feel like shooting them and then you don't clean them, I just kind of look to the safe, and the same thing with cans, because if you leave carbon buildup on metal, like, it's going to start to oxidize sooner or later, right? So what I do is I just take it outside and put a couple rounds to it real quick, and that just kind of knocks the oxidation off, for the barrel and the silencer. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as a method of doing that for everybody, but but it works.
I thought you were going to say you open the safe door, right? And you like punch a hole in some WD-40 or something like that, throw it in, kind of. I thought that's where we were going, and I was going to be down with it, right? I kind of like this, right?
Yeah.
But,
unfortunately,
no, I agree. And I think that we'll see that on. There's a lot of studies kind of around kind of first round and what first round is out of a barrel and all that kind of stuff. And, how much is oxidation? How much is this? How much is that? Getting something warm and blowing it out, you know what I mean? And giving it an opportunity to kind of free up is really effective as well.
I like it.
It's better than letting it sit.
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody's ever looked at a barrel that sat for a long time dirty with a bore scope, they get pitted up, over time. And if that gun just would have been shot a few times a year, it probably would have avoided that.
Interesting. That's super good tip. All right, Chase, you've shot several thousand rounds. You've cleaned your suppressor with the simple green method. Any care instructions for waste disposal?
I mean, I'm not going to throw lead down the drain. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not going to necessarily let my kids around it. You know what I mean? Let's just be kind of cautious of that, right? And lead is kind of the major thing. With non-caustic kind of cleaners, like I don't have to worry about chemical processes in that. Right? So, my go-to is, if your state, county, I live in Louisiana, parish, you know what I mean? Like has recommendations around that, do your due diligence, just like you would with car batteries and air conditioners and everything else, right? Like
motor oil
is, and motor oil, all of it, right? Like it's treated the same way.
Yeah. When the grate in the road says dump no waste, drains to stream, think about that.
Yeah, please don't do that.
But no, awesome, man. This has been super cool, really informative. Before we started,
and shockingly, took more than 10 minutes.
Well, I was gonna say before we started, we were kind of joking about the 10-minute talk designation and how it was. And I say this in all honesty, it was we had good intentions with the 10 minutes off the start, and then now it's become like unintended clickbait. Like people are like, oh yeah, that won't take that long. It's like, well, surprise. But we bounced around. We bounced around on this one a little bit. I think overall we covered a lot of a good positive ground. People can have some really informative takeaways. If we were a bullet and a suppressor combo with the way we bounced around, we probably would have had a baffle strike today, Scott. But
yes,
I think we got there.
Good analogy.
I think we got there. So Chase, man, I appreciate you joining us. We're gonna have to get you guys back on again here at some point. And yeah, appreciate you taking the time. Appreciate the listeners out there taking the time, more than 10 minutes. Yes. And until next time, we'll catch you on the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Chase.
Thanks, Chase.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.